Good morning, everyone. The beginning of this service, at least while we're experimenting with this format, I want to help encourage the sense of community, the sense of being here with our full hearts, and the chance to understand why there are candles glowing. I will read from a couple of notes that were left for me for the candles that are here, and if there are more candles that people would like to light for a particular sorrow or joy, Betty Kendrick and Rick Ullman have a candle of sorrow for a neighbor, Scott, who died unexpectedly. So sorry. A joy for Michael Solomon, who just enjoyed a wonderful week with his daughter Jess and grandson Carter, who visited from California. Wonderful. And a political joy that the Dems took the Senate. And that was unsigned, but from the collapse, I would guess that that's a few people. All right. So are there any other sorrows or joys that people would like to lift up this morning? Kevin.
Just a joy, today is my wife's birthday. And she looks really great for being 22 years old.
Happy birthday, Aaron. Heather. A 7 a.m. call on your phone? 7 p.m. Okay, that sounds a little better. 7 p.m. surprise phone call from your nephew, 17-year-old nephew. Hey, I'm in the neighborhood. That's coming in from 8 hours away. Come see Aunt Heather. Good. Thank you all for sharing what you have from your heart, and perhaps as the day progresses and you're lingering during the coffee time, you can check in with one another and light candles in the conversations that you have with one another. So I have a few announcements. I didn't see a slide for it, but Power Up is November 20th. That's where you buy a meal. This is a joint project with the Episcopalians over here, and it's at their place at St. Philip's. Go around the back to get your meal. The Jewish community here in Brevard and this congregation pulling together to do it. Thank you so much for those of you who are signing up to help and volunteer. No matter what age you are in doing that. I also wanted to mention today we have soup. If you came in the backside and didn't notice the smell and didn't see it, all over here, those who are sitting in the back there, you're going to have your appetite teased with the aroma breezing in. But we invite you to stay for our soup time together after the service. This has been a long time since this was done away with the pandemic. To be back in today is like, as somebody told me, I love this. Yeah. I want to mention that we've also have, over the last several months, for those of you who don't know, leadership, my involvement in leadership and doing things in the congregation. I believe Wednesday is team night, or at least on my calendar it is. If it isn't, we can make it that. But that's when different teams and committees kind of come together, and I get to go from one to another. It makes it so much easier on the minister's schedule not to do Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday with each one. And so I will be glad to stop in for I'm guessing adult RE and social action at least, but maybe not. We'll see. Just want to let you know that that kind of thing happens, and I have it down for Wednesday. Membership. Membership private signings can be arranged. I would like for folks to realize that when the pandemic shut us down from doing big gatherings and things, and the membership team kind of disintegrated, we stopped doing new member classes and everything. But we asked that people get a little orientation and then sign the book. And I've been doing that as requested after services as needed. I know I have one person today. I know we have a couple of people who are going to do it maybe next week. But just be sure to come and ask for one of those signing sessions. We have been signing in new members throughout the pandemic, and we'll let you know when we get back to actual classes. But individually, we can do that. There was a slide up there from the Braver Angels. Braver Angels has coming up on Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and that means that across the time zones, different people can sign in to it. An online discussion for the diverse viewpoints of folks following the national midterm elections. How do you talk about this to somebody? How do you build bridges? I'm part of Braver Angels. I know Joanna is part of Braver Angels. Are there others in this group that are part of that national organization? Susan Selly and Vanessa and others, if you ever want to talk to us. But you can sign into this. We can get you the link. In fact, I'll make sure it gets sent out with the link to this service tomorrow so that you can see what the sign up will be. You sign up and then you get the link. But then I just learned yesterday through the NAACP gathering I was at with the religious leaders that on the 28th, there will be a local gathering for people who want to build bridges. So in this post-election time period, there's more than one group trying to think of ways in which we talk about it and we process. I wanted to bring that up for you. There is a poster on that one in there, so when you're getting your soup, look on the bulletin board and you'll see a plain 8.5 by 11 with some info, and we'll get it out electronically. If there were more announcements, I've completely forgotten them, and so you just have to read your newsletter, which I know is a pain and a chore, but it really does have a lot of information. So thank you all. I welcome you to this service, no matter who you are, who you love, how you identify. I welcome you to this community of folks whose warm hearts are here to open a space for spiritual growth and development and engagement in the deep issues of the world. I welcome you this morning. I turn the service over now to Mike Griffin, our worship associate.
Good morning on this cool, crisp winter's day. Be a good day to go and have some soup, hot soup afterwards. These are the words from the Reverend Ashley Horan. My comrades in organizing have taught me this lesson. When a silenced people want to be heard, to raise from dry bones a living, breathing dream of new ways of moving, being, incarnating freedom, one small, tenacious group whose hearts beat in rhythm, rising shoulder to shoulder against the inevitable, will bend the arc from impossibility to hope. Our young climate leaders are one such group, and they're teaching us this lesson. When the grown-ups and the old movements are just too slow, as the sea levels rise and the hurricanes rage and the migrants flee and the corporations profit, one generation, both young and silenced, refusing to accept an inheritance of doom, will take to the streets and move us toward life. Blessings upon them as they teach us, organize us, beckon us in, and call us out. May their fierce urgency and uncompromising clarity show us the path toward healing and freedom and hope. Blessed be and amen. And now, if you will all rise as you're willing and able, we'll have the opening hymn, number 164, Blue Boat Home. Really in good voice today. That was rousing. The chalice lighting, which we're going to read in unison, was written for the Sunday after 9/11, but it's appropriate for many occasions, particularly useful on difficult days. And so if you'll join me in unison. Why a flaming chalice? The question comes. It's the cup of life, we answer. A cup of blessings and overflowing. A cup of water to quench our spirit's thirst. A cup of wine for celebration and dedication. The flame of proof. The fire of purification. Oil for anointing, healing, out of chaos, fear, and horror. Thus was the symbol crafted a generation ago. So may it be for us in these days of uncertainty, sadness, and weariness, to warm our souls and guide us home.
Reverend Bob, hello out there. Yeah, Reverend Bob is wearing at least two hats this morning. One is up here and out there, and the other one is over here with the choir, for which we are very grateful. The choir is going to sing two anthems for you this morning. The first one is the old one, the second one is much newer. Excuse me. I don't know if anybody here, there are a lot of old people in here, but I don't know if anybody in here was alive in New England in 1786, kind of looking around. I don't think so. If you had been, you would have heard people singing shape note hymns. Shape notes were what was used for the people that couldn't read the regular notes, so they gave each note a circle or a triangle or a square or a trapezoid or who knows, I don't know what the shapes were. Some were 5 shapes, some were 7 shapes. But at any rate, William Billings was one of the leaders in this. It was a kind of music that had no European roots. It's just like the banjo. It sprang from the depths here in the United States, in what was then barely the United States. The first one is called Jordan. The titles of these hymns in the Sacred Harp hymnal usually have nothing to do with the actual text of the hymns, but Jordan happens to. I'm going to read you a little of it. There is a land of pure delight where saints immortal reign. In infinite day excludes the night, and pleasures banish pain. Sweet fields beyond the swelling flood stand dressed in living green. So to the Jews old Canaan stood, while Jordan rolled between. You have to, of course, conceive of a congregation that really sang, and they sang in 4 parts. And the tenor carried the tune, carried the melody. And you'll hear that, I hope, from the tenor section back here in the corner, but they're singing out nice and loud. We have a couple of sopranos and maybe some others helping with the tenors. But the tenors carried the tune, and the sopranos carried what was the descant. The second piece that we're going to sing for you is called Sing My Child. The words for that one will be on the screen because it's a little bit long and a little bit complicated, but it was written recently in 2016 by Sarah Quartel. I hope that you'll enjoy it. It's Sing My Child, Dance My Child, Laugh My Child in the 3 verses, and it ends with Peace My Child. This is Jordan. Whoa, there we go. You notice the couple of sopranos went back to make sure the tenor part gets heard.
Sweet fields beyond
Good morning. I'm Kevin. I'm the director of the Children's Religious Exploration, and so happy to see everybody here. Does anyone remember what the theme for the month of November is here? Change? Yes, change. And we're going to be talking about change. Later, we're going to be in class singing about it a little bit. And we're going to be learning about change in this story. This is a Sufi story, The Stream. So imagine a stream flowing through a desert with mountains nearby. And that stream passed every type of obstacle, flowing over cliffs and around rocks until it finally reached the desert. But it found as quickly as it tried to flow through the desert, the faster it flowed, the more it disappeared. But the stream was convinced that it had to cross the desert. It was its destiny. And so it kept trying to flow and flow, but it couldn't get anywhere. It would disappear into the sands. And then a hidden voice, nature itself, whispered, "The wind crosses the desert, so can the stream." Now the stream thought this was ridiculous. How could a stream cross the desert like the wind? It couldn't accept it. But nature reminding it that if you hurtle away the way you've always have before and the way you've grown accustomed, you'll disappear or maybe just become a marsh. You must allow the wind to carry you to your destination. But how can this happen? That hidden voice said, by being absorbed by the wind. Now, of course, the stream thought this was a terrible idea. It hadn't done this before. It wasn't going to do it now. You can't do what hadn't been done before. But nature said, trust. Trust in the arms of the wind and let yourself be picked up. For the wind performs this function. It takes up the water, it carries it, and then lets it fall again. But how can this be true? It is so. And if you do not believe it and don't try it, you won't become anything anyways. So the wind thought and thought hard about it. The stream thought and thought hard about it. And maybe a little part of that stream at one time remembered being carried by the wind way back before. And so it decided to give it a try. And so the stream let its vapor rise up into the wind and let it be carried by the wind, where it went along gently up and over the desert, where it reached the mountains, and it finally fell like rain again, becoming a stream into a river to its destination, the ocean. And this is a little magical story just helping us to remember that change can be good, but it's hard sometimes, it's painful, and you have to have a lot of trust in it. So we're going to be learning a little bit more about change with the book Change Sings by Amanda Gorman, the inaugural poet. And we're going to head out, but first, Katie, will you bring up our candles so we can light it, please? And sorry, I don't see where the little taper lighter is. All right, and all the kids can come with us now.
You know what? I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the existence of this congregation and our mission. I'm grateful for the chance to be part of a congregation that supports open-mindedness, diversity, respect for people, who stand up for rights, who want folks to find a way religiously, spiritually, not a way, but their way. It means a lot to me to be with Christy making a substantial pledge for the good of this congregation. And for those of you who are visiting, and we have so many people visiting today, you'll see that when we pass the basket, not everybody puts something in. I want you to know that these people are sending in their checks or doing a IRA distribution or having auto withdrawal done. But we have this time in which we can also pass the basket to help Sharing House, putting cash or money into an envelope in there to help support Sharing House, or a few extra dollars to help along this congregation. If you're a visitor, you don't have to put money in. That's our responsibility. But we invite generosity out of your hearts as well in whatever ways you might want to do it. Your time, your talent, your trust, or yes, indeed, your treasure. We now receive the morning offering. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Dick. What is given in love, we receive with great joy, and we say, thank you. I invite you in this moment to take a deep breath, maybe to settle yourself in whatever way helps you gather into this time of meditation and prayer. Spirit of love and life, we who are gathered here come after weariness with political campaigns that seem to have been never ending, with the cacophony of political commercials, the littered wayside of political signs. May we see once again nature Take a deep breath and understand that we are now back to our lives of putting together a society that most closely fits the values that we would hope for ourselves and we would hope others would have a chance to build as well. In the jangliness of all that's occurred, may we know this as a place of peace and support and comfort. In the sense of hopelessness, may we find again this chalice light glowing into our hearts, this community of warmth all around us, this full room this Sunday, reassuring us we are not alone and we can do things together. Our hearts go out today to those who are suffering, those who are feeling less than healthy. We have the joy of welcoming back into our midst those who have been in the hospital. We have the prayers going out to those who are still in the hospital, those who may be ill at home, those who are making it, but only just so. Our hearts go out to those who are grieving, including Betty and Rick for their neighbor. Our hearts go out to those who have visitors, a wonderful time of visits of nephews, daughters, grandchildren. We live connected as human beings. No matter what the political climate may tell us, we human beings need to feel the connection with one another. Whether our born families or our chosen families, these are important. We hold these and the meditations of our minds, the prayers of our hearts now in a moment of silence. In the names of all those known and unknown, remembered and forgotten, and in the names of all the helpers of humankind, we say, Amen. Blessed be. A few of you here were here on Wednesday, our post-election day prayer service, which I promised the entire time I was here in the church, this chalice was glowing the day after the election for all of our prayers. In that service, I did a reading, and the group asked that I read it again to all of you. This is a story from the late John Lewis. As a young student, John Lewis had worked with Martin Luther King Jr., and then he became a key leader in the civil rights movement on his own. And he later became U.S. Congressman and prominent voice for human rights and justice here and around the world. From facinghistory.org, I bring you this quote where Lewis tells a story from his childhood just to describe his vision of how we can face profound challenges to make a better world. About 15 of us children were outside my Aunt Saniva's house playing in her dirt yard. The Sky became clouding over and the wind started picking up. Lightning flashed far off in the distance, and suddenly I wasn't thinking about playing anymore. I was terrified. Aunt Savina was the only adult around, and as the sky blackened and the wind grew stronger, she herded us all inside. Her house was not the biggest place around, and it seemed even smaller with so many of us children squeezed inside, small and surprisingly quiet. All of the shouting and laughter that had been going on outside earlier had stopped. The wind was howling now, and the house was starting to shake, and we were scared, and even Aunt Savina was scared. And then it got worse. Now the house was beginning to sway, and the wood plank flooring beneath us began to bend. And then a corner of the room started lifting up. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. None of us could. The storm was actually pulling the house towards the sky, with us inside it. That was when Aunt Saniva told us to clasp hands. Line up and hold hands, she said, and we did as we were told. Then she had us walk as a group towards the corner of the room that was rising. And from the kitchen to the front of the house we walked, the wind screaming outside, sheets of rain beating on the tin roof, and then we walked back in the other direction as another end of the house began to lift. And so it went back and forth, 15 children walking with the wind, holding that trembling house down with the weight of our small bodies. More than half a century has passed since that day, and it has struck me more than once over these many years that our society is not unlike the children in that house, rocked again and again by the winds of one storm or another, the walls around us seeming at times as if they might fly apart. It seemed that way in the 1960s, at the height of the civil rights movement, when America itself felt as if it might burst at the seams. So much tension. So many storms. But the people of conscience never left the house. They never ran away. They stayed. They came together. And they did the best they could, clasping hands and moving toward the corner of the house that was the weakest. And then another corner would lift, and they would go there. And eventually, inevitably, the storm would settle and the house would stand. Still stand. But we knew another storm would come, and we would have to do it all over again. And we did. And we still do. All of us, you and I, children holding hands, walking with the wind. I'm facing, for those of you who are online don't know this, I'm facing a section of the congregation, usually not full, which was so full. It's a joy to see so many of our families here. You really don't have to segregate families over to this side, but it's lovely to see the concentration of it. So thank you. You know, I've been planning this service knowing that the topic is change and all the predictions of what wave of politics were going to happen and the worse and the worse and the worse, that the pollsters were saying everything would be in America as of this week. And I look even this morning at the newest news and what new counts are coming, and I am afraid. I am afraid. Because you see, we get full attendance when our open-minded members feel all alone and scared. And it's not looking quite as bad as it might have for our open-minded members. I don't think we have closed-minded members, so that means attendance might be worse next week. Even though we're offering bread. You get to share bread in the service in a Thanksgiving celebration. At least come for the bread, even if you don't need the comfort anymore. Change comes. A quote I picked up this week, "Darkness comes and no sense of a turning of equal light and dark that we may have had in the past." You know what? It's not solstice yet. It's not the end of the darkening days. I think metaphorically for our society, we're not at the end of our darkening days. There are going to be all sorts of things. But the choir singing out what they were singing. The John Lewis story. What Michael, our worship associate, so aptly found for this morning's service in talking about how young folks are wanting to look ahead. In that particular one, climate change, but if you look at the polls, how they were more forward-thinking than reactionary in their votes. There is a sense of change in the air. There is a sense that there will be continued fights, and especially as now everybody's going to want to announce who the next presidential candidate would be, because we can't possibly have a little gasping breath in amongst the political ads. So I had a story that I was going to use either as a story, but I really liked what Kevin brought. The river that gets to a certain point and then has to transform and become evaporated. Are there times in which you feel evaporated, or the values that you felt strongest for were evaporated? That story means we will come over the obstacles and rain down in the new land. At least that's the way I want it to be. All right? But the story I had this idea of contrasting the Scottish story of Tam Lin with some Buddhist perspective on things. And it may still help us here. I'm gonna read a little bit of Tam Lin. This is an anonymous Scottish ancient story. Anonymous usually means it was a woman, so they never bothered writing down her name. Okay, an ancient Scottish story. It's being retold by Betsy Cornwall. This was from Parabola magazine a couple years ago, a spring 2019 edition. Janet, the only child of a Scottish laird, spends her days wandering the wild forests of Cardahaw. I can't say it in Scottish accent, but that's what it says. And there she meets a beautiful, mystical young man named Tam Lin, and before long, Janet becomes pregnant. When Janet goes to her father with the news, he does not shame or berate her. Instead, he asks which of his men is responsible for this child. And she replies that her lover was not a mortal man at all, but one of the fairies who haunt the woods. And her father advises her to seek out the local wise woman who will be able to help her find an abortive herb. Herb. On her way to the wise woman, Janet meets Tam Lin again. And she tells him about her pregnancy and how she despairs of being able to raise a half-fairy child. And Tam Lin responds and says, no, I'm not actually one of the fairies. I'm not. I'm their prisoner. He was once a mortal, but was captured by the fairy queen because she so admired his beauty. And so Janet asks, is there any way that I can free you? And there is, Tam Lin replies, that very night is All Hallows Eve. And the fairy court will go out on their annual ride through the forest, and I will ride on a milk-white horse, he said, and right at the fairy's right hand. So pull me down from my horse and hold on to me tightly, no matter what happens. And here I'm just going to summarize and stop reading from Parabola. So Janet does that. Halloween evening, goes out, pulls him off his horse while the fairies are out on their march, holds on to Tam Lin with everything she's got. And the fairy queen then, jealous, says, oh, no, you don't, and changes him into horrible, awful, yucky things and scary things, a lion roaring. But she holds on and she holds on and she holds on with all the love that she has. And finally, it breaks the spell. This process breaks the spell that holds him to the queen. And the queen admits in the end that she was wrong to turn Tam Lin into a lion to scare Janet into letting go what she loved. She should have instead changed his heart to wood, that he would not have kept his love for Janet. Don't you just hate royalty? You can't have what I want, and I'm going to ruin you and turn your heart into wood, unfeeling, unbeating. How many political ads were trying to turn our hearts to wood? How many kings or kingmakers, queens out there were out to say that, well, just to turn us off and scare us from holding on to what we believe in? Our values, our love of what we hold on to. How many were trying to get us to give up and let go, that they might get what they want, had always wanted, and hold prisoner for themselves. That Scottish story buried in this magazine spoke a lot to me as we were approaching this weekend. It still does. Because I think that we hold on to certain values and promote them in ways in which we encourage one another to hold on. You know, we talk about this with LGBTQ rights in particular. Just because the child you love now expresses themselves or identifies themselves in a new way does not mean that we are scared and we suddenly let them go. We don't give them up to a scary, awful world without our love and support. Kevin Lausch, our director of CRE, who gave us our story this morning, worked tirelessly since summer, at least, to pull together a consortium of folks who would help support youth, marginalized youth, especially LGBTQ youth in our society. A partnership with TC Strong, hosted here in this building now for the second meeting twice as many people. In fact, they filled up every single table that was set up for our soup luncheon. Their families and the kids of all ages. Kids who had pronouns on that might not be recognizable to their parents or their grandparents on a sticker. Kids who may have been dressed with some hint of a different gender. Kids dressed up, one kid dressed up just like me today, with a dress shirt and tie and dress slacks. Kids who applauded when I told them that Unitarian Universalists in 1970 said, we, the General Assembly of Unitarian Universalists, all our delegates are saying, homosexuality, they used that word back then instead of gay or lesbian or whatever. Homosexuality is not a mental illness, no matter what the psychological associations are saying. And it shouldn't be illegal anywhere. For these kids to hear that sometime in 1970, Unitarian Universalists were holding on to Tam Lin, holding on to their values no matter what society was saying. I think America was doing that this time too. I'm going to read you a couple of things that I wrote down as notes. Loving people and not wanting slavery in America. Do you realize that voters in 4 states approved ballot measures that changed their state constitutions to prohibit slavery and involuntary servitude this year? 4 states passed it. Because you see, it was still going on. If they could pick up somebody, usually somebody of color, and accuse them of a crime, they could put them on the chain gang. Or make them make license plates. Or do something else. 4 states took it out of their constitution. That's holding on to Tam Lin. Took a while, didn't it? Ruah Rahman, a 29-year-old community organizer, made history as the first known Muslim woman elected to the Georgia House of Representatives and the first Palestinian American elected to any office in that state. Georgia just elected a 29-year-old Muslim woman who wears the head covering. New York Times reports that Maura Healey, one of the nation's first 2 openly lesbian governors, Maxwell Alejandro Frost, the first Generation Z member of Congress, Wes Moore, the first black person elected governor in Maryland, Katie Britt, the first woman elected to the Senate from Alabama. According to the nonpartisan LGBTQ Victory Fund, this was the first year with openly LGBTQ candidates on the ballot in every single state. And the group says more than 351, from congressional and governor's races all the way down to school boards and city councils. You realize that the United States now has 3 states that, as of January, going from 1 to 3 times as many, led by LGBTQ people. 2 lesbians, 1 gay man was reelected. I saw somebody else quote that 436 LGBTQ candidates won so far. So I can't justify why the 2 things. But I wanted to say a lot of holding on to Tam Lin among a lot of political messages that are contrary to what I've preached from this pulpit, that Unitarian Universalists have been preaching since before 1970, when they finally got it into a social action statement that we accept people no matter who you are. We see you as a person and competent and whole, and we lift you into places of authority no matter what. I didn't know 2 years ago, moving to the south here again, something that was going to happen, and that was that North Carolina was going to have a competitive black woman running for Senate. Not so bad to lose with over 47% of the vote. That's holding on to Tam Lin. That's amazing. You want to say to somebody 2 years ago that a black woman was just barely going to be losing for a Senate position? Hard to understand. In our congressional district, the person who lost as a Democrat in an overwhelmingly Republican area lost with more points than the male Democrat 2 years ago had lost by. And she was, in the first sentence of her website, an out lesbian activist. Over 44.4% of the vote. I want to tell you that looking at who lost and by how little, considering that there were so many laws being promoted to say they needed to be erased, children should not know about this, they couldn't play sports, no matter what it was, we held on to Tam Lin. And yet that wasn't true all up and down and all over, that there was winning all over for some of the values we hold dearly. And we're going to have to do what John Lewis says and run from corner to corner of the house, holding hands, our small bodies, holding down and anchoring the house built so carefully with values over time to uphold democracy and the participation of all. We're going to have to still be out there. And at the event on Wednesday here in this room, there's a member who spoke up and said, I and my friends have already made an agreement to show up at local school board meetings and call out the extremists when they speak up. And we've been told that actually that will help. That will help. Maybe holding hands with those folks and showing up when that corner of the house seems to be ripping up. Why aren't the youth who are gathering here in our community gathering at a GSA club in the schools? Because it's too controversial still. But we've opened our doors. Now, how does this contrast with the Buddhist side of things? You may know, when I was on sabbatical in a congregation, I went off and did some Buddhist practice, some learning. Vipassana Buddhist leader, teacher was trying to help me out. And I think I've admitted to you, I went to that teacher and said, I sit there. I look good sitting there. I look good sitting there. But my mind is just not staying on the meditation. It's just jumping all over the place. I have monkey mind. And so, do I practice Buddhism? Yeah, like in a second, I might get it. 1 second, a century. I don't know if I add up the milliseconds. My mind is quiet. But there's a piece of what Buddha was teaching about suffering in giving up attachments. Now this is the contrast with Tam Lin. Give up attachments. If you are at this moment, I give you credit, if you're at this moment still feeling like you are attached to a particular candidate winning and you can't let it go, maybe you need to let it go if that gives you enough chance to hold hands with somebody else and take an action, a step, to make things work better next time. Because You're just putting yourself into a whole bunch of suffering, which the majority of the people who turned out, which wasn't the majority of voters, is not the majority of people who are really thinkers out there. You have the ability to join up with others, to let go the fact that who you wanted didn't get there. And now work on what's next. This is the evaporation point. Your stream is not getting from point A to point B without evaporating, being lifted into being a cloud, and then raining down next time. But you cannot float unless you let yourself let go. Now, the person trying to teach you this Buddhist lesson of suffering and letting go does not do what he preaches. I grasp onto and worry over and continue to look. So I have to say it from the pulpit to all of you to convince myself that maybe it's worth following. But really, time to evaporate. Let evaporate the things that are holding you back and keeping you in a bitter, unmoving place, because you got to move, folks. We've got to move. We got to listen, hold hands, and run to the next corner. And then we got to be ready to do it again. And the storm will die back. Whew, and the house will still be standing. But there'll be something else. Or a repeat of what we're getting back to. We've went over in this service because we had terrific music. Because we had heart and candles. Because we have a preacher who cannot give up preaching about this. Not even for a second. Hold on to what you love no matter what way it changes in front of you. Know that at the core is what you love, and it is beautiful. Do not let the fairy queen tell you otherwise. Do not let the kingmakers tell you otherwise. Let go of what's weighing you down. Thanks for listening. We have a closing hymn that relates somewhat to all of this in some way, whose number and name I can't even remember. 183, The Winds of Change Forever Blown. Please rise as you're willing and able, and sing as you're willing and able. I extinguish the lights of our candles, but not the way in which we uplift our hearts to one another. Our chalice flame is out, but we're going to carry it with us into this world that, darn needs it. Let's remember some hope and holding hands, even in the midst of our fear of whatever's going on, especially then. Blessings on all of you. Now go eat soup.